Doing good. Courtney, it's been so long.
I know. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, for cleaning up my
Okay,
table.
thanks. Thanks for letting me know.
There you go. Oh, what I did? Cool.
Pull the table out so you have to crawl. And Catherine, Pam's going to be about 5-10 minutes late.
Who is? And get her car started? All right.
This is a room of kindness, isn't it? Kindness and grace.
Did that happen before?
That's what I say.
I mean,
Oh,
what I was doing. Also, I need to learn how to dress from or
Oh,
not.
now I
Too.
Huh?
I worked out this morning.
You had to hang around when I was thinking of which you were.
So,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, generally not.
So that's why I
Well,
felt
now I got it.
not
It's a
safe.
long way. Did you drop off?
No, the other mom did. Yeah, she did drop off and pick up. Yeah, so that's why I have to do it.
Yeah. That's
That works. Yeah,
I know. Oh, how cute.
I know.
She's happy. Good job.
Yeah.
All righty. Good morning, commissioners. And over to you, Chair Harton.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tuesday, September 10th, 2024, the Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. This is Chair Catherine Harrington. I'm joined by Vice Chair Commissioner Nafisa Bai, Commissioner Pam Tree,
Sliding in home at
Jerry
last.
Willie, and Commissioner Rogers is expected. So our first item on the agenda, we'll do board and leadership communication as the last item. Our first item is with our own Director of Assessment and Taxation, Joe Nelson, with regard to the Property Value Appeals Board. Oh, hello, Fred.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Harrington Board of Commissioners. For the record, my name is Joe Nelson. I'm the Director of Assessment, Taxation, Records, and Elections. And with me today is Fred Ramstead. She's the Division Manager for Cartography and Records. Today, our purpose, as you stated, is to present the candidates of the Property Value Appeals Board. To start with, I'd like to clarify the legislation from the 2023 session. House Bill 2031 renamed the Board of Property Tax Appeals to Property Value Appeals Board. And they did this with the intent to match the name with the authoritative action. And used to imply that you could appeal the taxes. It's actually appealing by statute, the value, and the taxes are the resultant. Secondly, House Bill 2237 increased the board member term from 1 year to 2 years. Last year, we had a very successful year, and I'm really appreciative of the 2 remaining board members, and we have 1 new applicant this year for a total of 3 board members. The purpose of the Property Values Appeal Board is more than just weighing evidence and adjudicating values. It's an opportunity to demonstrate the transparent process, the accuracy of the tax system, and is a vital contributor to the public confidence of Washington County. An example of this is we only had 153 appeals this last year, which is significantly down from when Measure 5 first was implemented, with 6,200 appeals.
Wow.
So,
And if I remember the data, you issue 200 over 220,000 property tax.
Almost 230. That's the exact number is 229,105.
Oh, I missed that. That's a lot.
It's a lot of. Board members must be residents of Washington County who do not work for the county or any other taxing districts. It is a system of peer review, and this is a very important point. Community engagement conducted the vacancy announcement and recruited for this board. The recruitment period ran from April 2nd, 2024 to May 15th, 2024. This year's candidates are Anthony Mills from District 1, and he's been on the board since 2012. Eric Squires from District 1, and this is his second year. And Beverly Mosier from District 2, she's our new applicant this year. The next step is Board of Commissioner approval of the candidates. And this is on the board agenda for the regular session this coming October 1st. And at this point, I'm open for any questions or comments from the board.
I would like to start us off. Good morning, Commissioner Rogers. I'm all set with making the appointment, adding Ms. Moser, and really pleased to see that the term lengthens. But I have two comments. One is I would like us to figure out a vocabulary, and maybe we have one. I can't remember which ACA has our community engagement team to help with this across all boards and commissions. I would like us to develop a term, a label for those committees that meet in a somewhat narrow time of year, which I believe this one does.
This.
So it's really a limited time frame. But that's not a very good word, right? Or a phrase, in my opinion. Because I think that we would benefit from having more people serving on this committee so that we have representation across all districts, as well as some business owners, chamber representatives, or whatnot. So the first need is some labels for those committees that meet year round versus those that meet for a set time period. And the second comment I have is I'd like to suggest we move forward with this appointment, but also keep the recruitment open with the specific purpose of looking for more applicants from, well, it looks like we need more applicants from all districts except District 1. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think we also need to reach out to all of our chambers as well, for that too.
I think, my opinion, those are very good ideas, especially given the climate that we're in right now.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Any other comments? That's it. Great. Keep up the terrific work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next we are going to dive into one of our more complex set of land use and transportation ordinances, or really it's land use, but comes out of one joint department. So this is with regard to significant natural resources. So I just want to start by thanking you, Michelle Miller, because you've been working on this project, and maybe Teresa too, for all I know, on this project for, I'd say 8 years or so. And wowie zowie is all I could say, because I met you while I was in a different elected role before joining the county commission over 6 years ago, and you've been at it ever since. So thank you for continuing to ensure that the county does good work in this arena. And I'm just really impressed. So anyway, I just couldn't help myself but start us off on hopefully a joyful note.
Well, thank you, Chair Harrington. We have a great team working together to really make this happen, and it is a complex problem and issue, and so we have had a lot of support. We've had support with our management staff as well, and so it's really been a department-wide project. So good morning, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. I'm Michelle Miller, Senior Planner. I'm here with Teresa Cherniak, Principal Community Planner. And I'm here to talk about ordinance numbers 901 and 902. They're amendments to the comprehensive plan related to significant natural resources. So today's presentation will be a bit of a preview of the ordinances to come, some background to refresh your memories, and to familiarize yourself with the materials included in the ordinances. The purpose is to give you an overview of the ordinances in advance of the first hearing. It's scheduled for October 1st. A bit of background on our task for updating the county's Goal 5 inventory and developing new regulations. Since the 1970s, the foundation for the statewide program for land use planning in Oregon has been the 19 statewide planning goals. Statewide Planning Goal 5 requires local governments to identify and protect significant natural resource areas. The procedures and requirements for complying with Goal 5 are in the Oregon Administrative Rules. The county adopted its Goal 5 program in the early 1980s and was acknowledged by the state. State law changed in 2017, expanding the requirements for land use regulations to be clear and objective to apply to housing. And the county's rules concerning natural resources were not clear and objective. And our natural resource regulations have been under scrutiny as a result. We adopted regulations in 2020 to address the state law clear and objective requirement, but those standards were appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals and remanded back to the county for further changes. In May of 2023, the Land Use Conservation and Development Commission ruled that because our natural resource regulations are not clear and objective, we were then out of compliance with Goal 5. The LCDC enforcement order directs us to make changes to our regulations and issued a stay on development that may affect properties with wildlife habitat, which is a type of county natural resources, until we adopt new regulations. Based on the LUBA remand and an enforcement order, the county undertook a broad review of its Goal 5 program, including its inventory, its comprehensive plan policies, and regulations. So following the Goal 5 process not only takes some time, as Chair Harrington indicated, it takes a lot of documentation, and you'll be seeing the fruits of these labor in the upcoming weeks. This table shows our projects kind of in a nutshell and how the required pieces of the Goal 5 program fit together. On the left column are the Goal 5 process steps that we went through with this project, and the corresponding middle column shows the deliverable for each of the processes. And the column on the right shows the outcome, or where the deliverable will be incorporated into the comprehensive plan pending your approval. I'll be talking about the various deliverables in the next few slides. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about the draft habitat inventory report. This map shows the urban unincorporated area of Washington County, with the grayish tan color showing the incorporated or city areas and the blue and orange encompassing the urban unincorporated area or our study area. The blue area where the bulk of our mapping and analysis was done and was part of the original inventory work that the county did in the 1980s. The orange areas are the new community plan areas where the cities may have already done their Goal 5 planning, and as a result, we've incorporated their work into this update. Our updated inventory will include 2 habitat types shown on this graphic. We have the riparian area, which contains the water resources and adjacent stream embankment, and the upland wildlife habitat, further upland from the riparian area, And you could see the treed areas there showing the upland. This graphic shows how we took the county's inventory and Metro's Title 13 inventory to consolidate them to get our new significant natural resource categories. The column on the left are the county's current 3 natural resource categories from the original inventory. The middle column shows the categories of Metro's inventory, which we used in our update process. The column on the right is the resulting new county significant natural resource categories, which will be shown on the maps as riparian wildlife habitat, which is mainly the metro riparian areas with some of the county's wildlife habitat that may have overlapped with the metro layer. The new county upland wildlife habitat is the combination of the former county wildlife habitat and the metro class A and B wildlife habitat that were found to be significant through our methodology that was developed in the habitat report. Using the habitat methodology in the inventory, our environmental consultant refined the map to remove developed areas, properties that may have received land use approval already, and the fragmented habitat patches, and then kept the habitat that met the significance criteria. Since we filed the ordinance and mailed out notice to property owners about it, we received a small number of map change requests that we are evaluating. If it's determined that a correction to the maps are necessary, we're proposing that ordinance number 901 be engrossed to make these map changes. Additional requests that may come in after August 31st and during our first year of implementation, we're considering an omnibus map amendment in late 2025. So now I'm briefly going to talk about the Goal 5 report, which includes the Metro Title 13 compliance and the Goal 5 ESEE analysis. So the relationship between Goal 5 and Metro's Urban Growth Management Functional Plan is a bit complex in that there are special requirements depending on whether the resources are considered regional resources or Title 13 controls, compared to other resources where the local jurisdiction needs to follow the standard Goal 5 process, which means we must complete the economic, social, environmental, and energy analysis, also known as the ESEE. This graphic shows how that relationship is discussed in the Goal 5 report that you will be receiving in the next couple of weeks. It is part Title 13 compliance, reported as regionally significant resources, namely those riparian wildlife habitat resources for the urban unincorporated area, and part ESEE analysis for those resources that aren't considered Title 13 resources, mainly the upland wildlife habitat that has come into the urban growth boundary before 2006. Coming out of the Goal 5 report and the ESEE was a recommendation to lightly limit conflicting uses in the upland wildlife habitat, carrying forward these principles that we've incorporated into our policies and also our code amendments. Prioritizing mature native trees and large habitat patches that are closer to the water. When the impacts cannot be avoided, disturbance areas should be cited to protect trees with the highest ecoservices value. Provide a clear and objective path for mitigation, and then flexibility to allow for different site conditions depending on the constraints of individual sites. And support the clustering of residential development away from the resources to balance our housing needs while protecting the resources. Next, return to our ordinance number 901, which contains amendments to the comprehensive framework plan and each of the community plans. The CFP updates include incorporating the recommendations in the ESEE into the significant natural resource policy, which is policy 10, and changes to policy 41, the significant natural resources map for urban growth boundary expansion areas. In each of the community plans, design elements, we made changes that removed design elements that no longer apply or were subjective. We clarified that other Goal 5 design elements to specify that they are policy guidance rather than development requirements. And then we added a summary of the work that we've been doing, and we amended the significant natural and cultural resources maps to reflect the changes that we've done through our updates to our inventory.
Could you give us a feel for how many community plans you needed to update? Or were they just, yeah?
We had to update, I believe it was 13, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, so it's all of them. And
I
they're.
lost sight of how many of them there were. So thank you very much.
So here's an example of the community map plan changes with the example of the Bethany Community Plan, incorporating the changes to the new significant natural resource categories for riparian and upland wildlife habitat. Now I'm going to speak to Ordinance number 902, amendments to the Community Development Code. Riparian wildlife habitat and mapped upland wildlife habitat have different development standards based on the different levels of habitat protection. Maintenance and repair of structures within existing building footprint and removal of certain trees, such as those that are hazardous, diseased, or dying, are exempt from both habitat types. Exemptions from the requirements for upland wildlife habitat include construction, maintenance, and repair of public park projects, transportation facilities, utilities, and mineral extractions. We also exempted small lots and lots with a very small amount of upland wildlife habitat that didn't contain any riparian habitat. Turning to the riparian wildlife habitat standards, they're similar to what we have currently. Development is still is strictly to moderately limited, but some development activity is allowed. If a development impacts riparian wildlife habitat, clean water services requirements will likely apply. Only the following activities are allowed in the riparian wildlife habitat: public transportation facilities and utilities, wildlife viewing areas or things like trails, restoration work, and at least one dwelling unit or a middle housing duplex. Even though these activities may be allowed, it doesn't mean that they're not regulated. There are state and local requirements like clean water services requirements or Department of State Lands permitting. Excuse me. So our proposed regulations for the upland wildlife habitat will not change our currently allowed uses. Development is still allowed. It focuses on tree retention or replacement. We provide a clear and objective path that includes a tree inventory, assessment of tree points, and tree retention and planting requirements. And then we have two alternative discretionary paths to attain that obtain the level of tree habitat protection that's identified in the ESEE analysis. And we provide a greater degree of protection for upland wildlife habitat that's within areas that have been added to the urban growth boundary after 2005, which is a compliance requirement of Title 13.
And before you move on, I want to make sure we're all clear on some of these terms. Given that the reason this has been remanded for clear and objective standards, when you use this phrase, two alternative discretionary paths, were how does that relate to having clear and objective? Is it discretionary for use by, that word discretionary threw me for a loop.
Sure. So one of the things about some of these sites, it's really, we had kind of case by case review of the site plans, but the rules, as you noted, we need to have a clear and objective path, meaning this is one path a developer can take when he looks at the site. So we've got our clear and objective path. And the Oregon administrative rules in Division 23 allow you to have discretionary path, but you need to make sure it's still compliant with what you've outlined as your program decision in the ESEE analysis. So it has to kind of
Yep.
be related.
Yep.
And the applicant or developer can take one of those two alternative paths at their choosing. So then it's allowed to be discretionary.
Now I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome. So to update you on where we are in the process, we've just held the last of 3 hearings with our planning commission, and they considered our ordinances. At the last meeting, which was September 4th, the planning commission recommended approval of ordinance number 901 and 902 with some recommendations to the board for engrossment. Staff is also planning to recommend approval of the ordinances with engrossment with the map changes we talked about earlier and other refinements to the code language. We're busy working on those right now, and those will be presented in the staff report and at the board's hearing on October 1st.
Sorry.
Oh, sure.
Staff also plans to recommend with engrossment to include and other possible refinements to the code language. I'm want to make sure I don't understand the scope of that because the planning commission you've been taking all of this to the planning commission. So I don't know if those possible refinements are based off of their feedback, or what I want to avoid is that those refinements include something that haven't gone through their lens or that they haven't discussed.
It's primarily based on their feedback.
Great.
And then we've had a few very, very minor non-substantive things that our current planning staff has kind of caught. And so we're making nothing substantive.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure that was all clear to us, what some of the nuances here before we get to the full Q&A. Thank you. Thank you for bearing with these clarifying questions along the way.
Oh, I appreciate them, Chair Hayden. So here's the upcoming board hearings with the actions the board could take and the 2 alternatives depending on the hearing on October 1st. Alternative 1 is if the board is ready to order engrossment on the 1st, and alternative 2 is if you'd like to continue the hearing to October 15th. You may recall that the enforcement order and the stay indicated that we had until October 1st to adopt new standards, and the stay will remain in place until these standards are adopted. We've had a very tight schedule for adoption of the ordinances, knowing that the stay is in place. We've had contact with the Department of Land Conservation and Development and to let them know of our status, and they don't object to our process taking a little bit more time and understand our engrossment process that we have to go through.
So the difference then between alternative 1 and alternative 2 is that if we want alternative 2, is that allowing an additional hearing on the engrossed?
Oh, do you want to go ahead, Teresa?
Well, alternative 2 is just, I think, if the board on October 1st doesn't feel comfortable yet with making a recommendation, if you had more questions
So
or
if you
wanted
want
us
more
to
time for
bring something
consideration.
back
Got it.
to the next meeting.
Okay.
And then we would do that, but it wouldn't be on the engrossed ordinance. That has to happen. We'll refile the ordinances based on what the board directs. And then under the charter, you'll have those 2 additional hearings.
Okay. All right. I'm clear on that. Is everybody else clear on that? Alternative 1 versus alternative 2.
I have one minor clarification.
Is it on this?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Your recommendation on alternative 1 versus alternative 2, did you put that there because you anticipate a lot of feedback and community coming out to either testify or
We,
Was your,
we have had some testimony, not, I would say not a lot. But yes, we would anticipate that the board will hear from a number of community members. But this is also just to, I guess, we will make a recommendation on October 1st for engrossment, but it's whether the board is comfortable with that yet, or we will probably have a couple options that we would offer for how to address some of the things that the planning commission had recommended. So it's really whether you still have questions
Is
about
it
it.
standard for them to bring us? We think this is ready. Here's the path for that. But commissioners, you're the decision maker. So they always bring us two options. If this, with this, one of the options being if you need more time for consideration for this.
yeah, thank you. I wanted to understand more if we are anticipating a greater turnout from the community, then I think I will lean towards option 2 so that we have more time. But so thank you for that indulgence.
And it would be the kind of thing that you would decide on the first based on how that goes, whether you feel you need more time or you're ready at that time.
So today is just really not, it doesn't matter. Okay.
Just letting you know
Yeah,
that
we have-
we've anticipated these and this is how they would play out.
Okay, thank you.
So if anyone has any other questions or comments in advance of the first hearing, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
I have some questions, but I don't know. That's
Go for it. Commissioner Rogers?
good. Well, it seems like deja vu. We keep dealing with these issues that we dealt with them a long time. I'm particularly pleased that we're somehow coming into unity with the metro maps, because that takes a lot of confusion away. My two questions. I know you've done a ton of work. This is a lot of it's very hard stuff. From those who are development community, it's setback issues. Is there any changes? Because obviously with the tight urban growth boundary, you have limited amounts of land. So anytime we put big setbacks in addition to containing the number of developable property, there's a problem. People are going to say it's a taking. They're going to say they got a problem. They can't develop. So is there in your minds any of this new mapping, any of this new analysis, any issues with the setbacks? That's question.
So we did hear from the development community, and they shared that concern you said about the small infill projects being a challenge to develop. And so we're looking at making some adjustments there for those type of properties. Also, we have an actual adjustment process from the design standards that developers can take, can look at to see whether some of those setbacks could be adjusted to shift, to reduce for fitting more trees on the lot, or to adjust the lot size. And then our clear and objective path does not put trees in a tract. It is trees that will remain on the private property. So there's no issues with setbacks there. We also have, we heard from individual property owners that were concerned about maybe some trees on their property that they wanted to take care of and maintained. So we're allowing a certain amount of area around the buildings where applicants could take out trees at will, depending on their needs, and then around different perimeters of the buildings on different sites. And the upland habitat regulations at this time only apply to if they have upland habitat only apply to properties that are over a half acre in size.
I think you answered that, but I guess it's clear and objectives in the eyes of the beholder, kind of like in the tax business. It's, reasonable. Is it reasonable? And what's reasonable? And clear, what's objective. So I appreciate your efforts. I think it's the topography and the way things change and riverbanks change, all kinds of things change. This is going to be a big struggle for this board as well as all of you in the future. My second question is on utilities. And that includes transportation projects. There are exceptions, I understand. I don't know the extent of the exceptions for utilities or for road projects. And let me give you an example on the utility side. Going from point A to point B, that you need a transmission line on a sewer, for instance. I get that. And I think anybody say, okay. How about our water retention basin? How about, other kinds of amenities that might need to be there, a pump station? I mean, who knows? So I don't know whether we have exceptions for that. On the road side, we might all argue, and we saw that down in District 3 in regard to a lot of arguments regarding tile flat extension. What needs to be done? What can be done? And public good versus maybe more localized interests. So do you think, and I guess this is a crystal ball, so I apologize, but do you think that you're clear, objective in terms of utilities like I've described, the pump stations, the retention basins, that those are okay and we're okay. And then on the road projects, that this board has sufficient flexibility if they can cite projects, or will that still be tied up because we're not clear and objective?
Sure. Well, we're taking a careful look at our language. And you might have noticed that we had an exemption for utilities
Right.
and how that kind of specific language is included in the code. The code standard, I can read it to you, what we have currently. It's an exemption for installation, maintenance, or construction of the following utilities: sanitary and storm, sewer and water lines, electric communications and signal lines, and gas distribution and transmission lines. But we'll take a careful look at that pump station
Right.
issue.
I
And
understand somebody might want to comment, but I specifically picked on water retention basins, and I specifically picked on pump stations because that's not, I think, specified. But you can look at that later.
okay, thank you. And regarding regarding riparian wildlife habitat, it's an allowed use, but it's also one of those exceptions that's included in our standards.
And on the road issue?
For the road as well, for roads as well.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, thanks.
Other commissioners, go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Thank you for your question, Commissioner Rogers. And I just wanted to, for the record, let my fellow commissioners know I sat in on the Planning Commission discussion on this last week. And it was very, to your point, they really focused a lot of time on the exemptions. There was a lot of discussion. They focused around the parks. I have a great deal of respect for the Planning Commission and the way they went about expressing their concerns, talking with one another, but really talking to both of you about their questions. And I just wanted to, from my perspective, I was really pleased with the interaction on the Planning Commission. But those exemptions were a big part of that focus.
Which begs the question, does today's presentation and or your presentation on October 1st, will you be providing a short but comprehensive, clear but comprehensive list of the variety of exemptions with a key message of where to find those exemptions within the actual ordinance documentation? Because what this board doesn't want to have to deal with is a public hearing where people just raise questions. Well, what about my property that has XYZ? Those properties should already be taken care of, or people have to read the actual documentation, right?
And we have done that extensively also in the planning commission. We had 3 reports for the 3 meetings, and there's a lot of background. We answered a lot of the community's questions in there, pretty specifically. So we'll do that in the board staff report. It's going to be a long staff report. So we will have a table of contents, so you'll be able to look through it and the pieces that you'd like, but we do.
Well, I expect to see the word exemption,
Right.
right, as a first word on one of them. So to get people's attention.
We'll do.
What some of us have had the pleasure, I use in air quotes, of dealing with is others leveraging fear. I can imagine an form email going out. If you have a tree on your property, you need to show up at the Board of Commissioners meeting on October 1st on these ordinances. And it's like, that is so off base. So let's make the presentation clear. So anyway, thank you. That was all based off of Commissioner Teresa's comment.
No, I don't have any questions on this. We've gone through this a lot. I appreciate your long-term work on this. So thank you, and hopefully we'll get it across the finish line.
Commissioner Fye?
Thank you. I do have a number of questions, and I did email just now to Brenda to schedule a briefing, more specifically a letter of testimony that came in from Fran Warren. I'd like to go over some of those key pieces that she called out. But with this presentation, besides that briefing, just for my own edifications here, the slide number 21, where you have proposed, and then I do have a couple minor questions from previous slides, but the proposed regulations include alternative discretionary path. Did those paths lead to the desired outcome, or is there one that outweighs the other? What is the impact of the 2 paths?
Well, the one alternative is a little more simple. It's a 30% retention area of the significant habitat that's remaining on the site. So set aside and attract. And that needs to balance with the clear and objective path. And then there's a third path that is for an environmental report where they would describe the habitat and go into depth about what the mitigation plan would be for that particular site. And that's very discretionary, and it would rely on the expertise of the consultant applicant. And so it would be a rigorous review of that process, and it would need to match that 30% tree retention or the clear and objective path, all kind of balanced of what was found in the ESEE to lightly limit upland habitat.
So there are 3 paths.
Sorry.
There are 3 paths. Is the property owner deciding if they want to choose the clear and objective path or one of the 2 alternative paths?
That's correct, Chair Harrington.
Thank you.
And the land use conservation strategies, how does that align with, or?
That's I think you're talking about at the state level.
Okay.
And we've worked closely with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they served on the technical advisory committee. And those conservation areas were evaluated by our environmental consultant while looking at the habitat that we have inventoried already, the metro and the county habitat inventory, and looked at the scale of where those conservation areas are in the assessment of whether to keep a particular habitat patch or not. So kind of to help make that decision for whether the habitat would remain or would be considered significant on the inventory. Frankly, our environmental consultant found that that wildlife habitat corridor was at a scale that was so much wider than what an urban environment habitat allows for. So there are these wide swaths that go over houses and different things like that. So it was really a challenge to compare that when looking at the refinement that's in our inventory currently.
And then the first two slides are just the education ones, the county, metro, and the new SNR categories.
Oh, sure. Pull that one up.
Just my own thinking, the colors on that slide, I mean, the blue and the green, do they have any significance on this?
Right. So when you look at our county, our original county categories, we had two categories for the water areas. There were the water areas and the wetlands, and then the water areas and wetlands that also contain fish and wildlife habitat. And those were in a lighter shade. So we've kind of represented the colors from the original Goal 5 inventory that we did in the 1980s. And then wildlife habitat is a green color. Doesn't quite match the color shade, but it's close. So it represents kind of riparian blue and upland wildlife habitat in green.
Habitat without having water.
So that's what I was wondering, and thank you for, there was a reason why I asked the colors, but in the first one, you have water areas and wetlands and fish, and then you have wildlife habitat, and then in the green, there's wildlife habitat. How do you dissect that?
Sure, that's kind of one of the problems with our Goal 5 inventory. We had water areas, and then they had areas, there's water areas that also have fish and wildlife habitat. And then there was this other kind of category that was wildlife habitat. Maybe they didn't know if there was water areas there, and that's why, or they were forested area habitat patches, standalone patches, and so they were called wildlife habitat. So it was at a time in the 1980s when they had limited information about topography or even GIS. So it kind of creates some confusion in our inventory. And then later we had the metro categories. So all of that was combined, and now to clarify, we'll be having these more certain categories.
Can go back one slide to the picture, the image. This might help too. So the riparian area is the area where that bottom part with the water in it, that's the water area. That's where the water is flowing. It's a channel. There may be fish there, but not maybe a lot of other animals. The area up from that a little bit, the soil may still be saturated with water. It may flood, so the water will go up. This is the area that Clean Water Services was primarily interested in and concerned about. That ends up being their vegetated corridor. So wildlife do use that and flow through it, but it's also a primary water area. Up from that, animals will, birds will be in the trees, the animals will be using the ground more. So it's different kinds of wildlife probably in the different areas. And the other distinction is that whether there's water present or the soils are water saturated, that kind of thing in the riparian area.
All right, finish
Can I
up.
ask one quick question?
Of course.
Lisa, you referred to the letter from Fran Warren. Was that to you or, because I don't recall seeing that letter, but maybe I probably missed it. So,
I'll forward it. I'm not sure who was CC'd, but it did come to my email and I'll certainly forward to the whole board.
yes,
So
don't we?
constituent emails that come into individual commissioners, either directly or through the form, need to be supplied to Mary for distribution in the constituent report.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if I missed that, in that. So yeah, if you could do that, that would be great.
Certainly.
And we do have several letters from Ms. Warren that will be included in the packet with the testimony.
Yeah, oh, that's right. Yeah, there's a few questions there that didn't have to do with my own prep work here, but I wanna just indulge on your brains a little bit.
Thank you very much for today's presentation. I have a few comments. The Committee for Community Involvement has had an SNR subcommittee for years. And you talked about the presentation here and material talked about receipt of information through the Planning Commission process and whatnot. So I would appreciate in your packet if you would note the most recent date by which you have received and processed communication from that subcommittee. Okay. And my particular reason for noting this is this project has been going on for a vast number of years before the four of us were even on the commission. And your material today talked about this work being very dedicated or one of your areas of focus since at least 2017. So irrespective of the possibilities of appeals to these specific ordinances, I would like your work to be done this year. So what I'm looking out for is analysis paralysis, right? I believe that the process that you've laid out and the content of the ordinance and having these multiple paths, for example, brings the project to completion. Additionally, for having the latest proposals for these ordinances coming on October 1st and having the associated staff report on that and the public hearing, I'm going to be turning to you after all of that and asking you the question, have we heard any public testimony today that provides for considerations that are new and not accommodated through the specific ordinance? We can receive comments we've not necessarily heard before from someone with different wording, but if it still is accommodated, the case that they're illustrating for maybe their specific property is accommodated by the proposed ordinances, then I don't see any reason why we should hold up. So heads up on that. Then I have a question on slide 11. I didn't write my numbers large enough. Yes, where in the last sentence, to address possible requests received between August 31 and the first year of implementation, staff will propose an omnibus map, emphasis on map, correction ordinance in late 2025. this, this goes back to, for example, the only illustrative map in the packet that I recall is this one. That's on slide 8, I think.
Well, well, we have the community plan maps is what the maps would be.
Okay.
Would be, if there are
Right.
any changes.
No, I
there.
get that.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to differentiate and make sure is clear, this is not countywide. Okay? These ordinances apply to these colored areas. Okay? So it's to, I think, it would help, in my opinion, the presentation if the presentation lists out the 13 community plans and make sure this map is in there. Okay? Because if someone comes and testifies about their property that's in the gray area, well, this doesn't apply. We need to make it easier for people to see where it applies and where it doesn't apply. Okay? And I know, because we've been on this journey with you, that with this diagram, it's an even narrower set. So it's important, and we're doing this work, but it applies to a narrow set of lands. So I'll just leave it at that. Yep, I made all my comments. I'm ready to get this thing done.
I have a clarifying question for you, Chair.
Okay.
You said to get this work done by the end of this year. The alternative that you presented ends in November. Were you thinking sooner than November?
November is this year.
Yeah, so that's what we're on the same. That I'm asking if you were recommending something different than what they had.
No,
Because I heard you say that
this year,
this year
you're
in agreement with them.
I think she's on calendar versus fiscal year.
No, we're
Not
talking
necessarily.
calendar year, and I
Yeah.
think Nafis is just confused with the term by the end of the year versus this year, and I think that's, we're talking about this year.
This-
Alternative 1 and alternative 2, and you're not suggesting anything different.
No, and I don't understand why anybody would be confused about that.
Yeah. Just
So
clarification.
what I heard you say is, I want to make sure you finish this work by the end of this year. What I saw was November of this year. I was asking if you were suggesting something different, but it sounds like this year. No, okay.
Correct.
We're hopeful.
We're all right. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
Good job.
So next we're going to go into another long topic, which is the UGR discussion.
Dun, 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 dun. Go. One big topic over
Take
the
up your
other.
whole morning here with LUT topics.
Why not?
Why not?
Ah.
Exactly.
There's a lot going on.
Usually we get the afternoons, so this is great, actually. So, good morning, commissioners. I'm Stephen Roberts, Land Use and Transportation Director. With me is Aaron Wardell, our Assistant Director and still acting Planning and Development Services Manager. So we want to just give you a brief status update on the status of the Metro Urban Growth Management process. You'll recall that Metro released the draft Urban Growth Report, UGR, back in July and opened it up for public comment for about 45 days. And just a day or two after the comment period ended, the Metro COO issued the Metro staff recommendation for Metro Council's consideration of the proposed request to expand the UGB for Shorewood West, which is just about almost 1,300 acres on the western edge of Sherwood. So there are a couple of upcoming meetings. We'll run through those as a part of the presentation, but in particular, Impact meets tomorrow night and they'll discuss this draft COO recommendation. And then they'll be meeting again on September 25th for a decision or a decision on a recommendation from Impact to Metro Council.
One very insignificant, perhaps, correction is that the report is going to be presented, first of all, by Metro staff to Impact, and then there'll be the discussion. So if there's any nuances, we should learn about those as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Point of clarification. Isn't the Metro Council required to adopt the urban growth report by the end of 2024? And then they have within some set period to complete any potential UGB decision?
My understanding, you would know better than I, but yeah, my understanding is their intent is to try to wrap both up by the end of the year.
Yes, that is definitely the council's goal, but by the requirements,
Okay.
they simply need to adopt the urban growth report by the end of this year and then have their intent to, by what time frame within the requirements, they will make any subsequent decision related to that.
Thank you.
So they're not required. If the adoption of the urban growth report says that they need to expand, they're not required to expand it within the 6-year time frame. I believe they have at least another 18 months to do so.
Interesting. Okay, I learned something new today.
Nuance there.
I'm not a lawyer,
Yeah.
okay, but that is my understanding of the facts.
Careful of nodding your head there, Courtney.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So, and so part of our purpose here today really is to give your board again the update, but also to provide a forum for some discussion around some of the issues that may arise relative to the consideration of this UGR or the UGB expansion proposal, and to ultimately provide any board direction or guidance to your impact rep, Commissioner Treese. And Commissioner, do you want to add anything before we jump in?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. Thank you, and thanks in advance to my fellow commissioners for the discussion.
Great.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, one quick thing, I just want to point out that tomorrow's meeting is online, and then the time that we vote is in person, just for information.
Okay, well, and I think I've sort of covered this slide already here. So we do have a few discussion questions for your board. And they are these. Do you have any proposed conditions of approval for impact and Metro Council consideration? Do you, as a board, support the Metro COO and staff recommendation of the baseline growth forecast, or would you recommend that impact discuss supporting a higher growth rate? And then do you have any other questions or concerns for discussion? And at this point, I'm going to pass to Erin, and she's going to walk us through the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Stephen. So some background on why we do this. The Oregon law requires that cities and metro areas within the state maintain an urban growth boundary. For the Portland metro area, Metro maintains our urban growth boundary, which includes parts of 3 counties and I believe 24 cities. It's a large urban growth boundary, and there's a lot that's happening within there. Metro is required to reevaluate the urban growth boundary every 6 years. So within that 6-year urban growth management cycle, there's a variety of compliance and technical analysis pieces that happen, and it all culminates with the adoption of the urban growth report at the end of the 6-year period. When Metro calculates the need and evaluates the urban growth boundary, they're required to use a 20-year population and employment forecast as a part of calculating the need for both population and employment land. And if they determine there is a need, they can choose to expand the urban growth boundary in order to accommodate that need. They could also choose to take other measures in order to accommodate that need within the existing urban growth boundary. The most recent on-cycle urban growth report and corresponding urban growth boundary expansion happened in 2018. And in 2018, it was a fairly large UGB expansion. The cities of Hillsborough, Beaverton, King City and Wilsonville all requested area to be added to the urban growth boundary and were approved to do that. All of those areas are undergoing their comprehensive planning processes and moving into development now. Metro's rules also do allow for what's called a mid-cycle UGB evaluation. And the mid-cycle was a little bit new. I believe it was used for the first time in 2021. I think that process was possible to use earlier, but that was the first time that it was utilized. In 2021, the city of Tigard asked for an urban growth boundary expansion for the River Terrace 2.0 area. Metro conducted a very careful and thoughtful analysis of that and determined that rather than doing an urban growth boundary expansion, they would do an urban growth boundary land swap. This is something that's allowed for in state statute, but that was the first time that Metro had opted for a land exchange rather than an expansion. So 2024 is again back on cycle for a regular urban growth management decision and possible UGB expansion. So we're going to go into the Wayback Machine now, back to the 90s, when Metro undertook an extensive, many years long process to prepare the 2040 growth concept. At that time, it was intended to be a 50-year look at what our region needed to do and needed to be as it grew up and where we wanted to see growth, where we wanted to see communities and employment land, and how we were going to build a transportation system that served all of those various areas. This was, at the time, very innovative work. It was studied all around the country and the world as how a regional government could conduct very comprehensive land use and transportation planning. And all of the policies adopted at that time encourage all of the great things listed on this slide. Housing available at all income levels, complete communities, quality transportation system, and protection of the rural areas outside of the urban growth boundary. Once Metro adopted the 2040 growth concept in the mid-90s, all of the local jurisdictions updated their comprehensive plans to meet the requirements of the 2040 growth concept. So all of our plans are consistent with this vision. This is what that 2040 growth concept map looks like. I know you're all familiar with it. What's interesting, I think, to look at is that you can really see our urban cores in the pink colors. That's the regional and town centers, pinks and purples, and you can see our major transportation corridors connecting that. And if you think about what the region looked like in 1995 versus today, you know that there's been a huge amount of realization and implementation of this vision as we move forward. We'll have another map later that shows the urban reserve areas that are possible for UGB expansion. They're on this map. They're hard to see, though. They're in kind of that tan color. So we'll move forward now to 2010, and actually it started a few years sooner than that, but Metro worked with the 3 counties and other partners to jointly designate our 50-year supply of urban reserves and rural reserves. The purpose of doing that analysis was to determine with certainty the areas where the urban growth boundary could be expanded and areas where it could not be expanded. And so that went through years of legal challenge and was finally settled for Washington County in 2014 with the legislative fix of HB 4078. And so that decision set our urban reserves. They are contiguous to our urban growth boundary. Those are the areas that can be asked for as a part of urban growth boundary expansions. Similarly, in about the same time frame, Washington County convened the Urbanization Forum, again, with many of our partners within the county and with Metro. And at that time, an agreement was entered into that from that point forward, only cities would initiate and manage urban growth boundary expansion requests, which meant that Bonnie Slope West and North Bethany would be the last urban growth boundary expansion areas that Washington County would plan and implement as a county.
Metro adopted that policy before the forum was over and applied the policy, proposed the policy across the whole region. And that policy was formally adopted and put into Metro Code.
And the county signed on to it as well. So we're all partners in this agreement.
But I don't think we have it in our code.
I do not believe it's adopted into our comprehensive plan. I think you're correct. Yes.
Yeah,
Different.
there's
a signature.
Yeah, there's a resolution that implements that urbanization forum outcome. Yeah.
This board hasn't seen that.
And we can share that document with you for your information. So now we're back caught up with modern times. We're in 2024 again. And so Metro initiated the urban growth management decision, urban growth report process about a year ago. And so Metro Council will now, as the chair clarified earlier, take action on the urban growth report and intends to take action on a UGB expansion decision by the end of the year. As a part of the process, again, going back to the urbanization forum and some of the agreements and changes Metro's made to their process, cities have to ask and show that they have considered land readiness and they have prepared a concept plan for an area in order to ask for an urban growth boundary expansion. As a part of this decision, the city of Sherwood was the only city that requested an urban growth boundary expansion. Sherwood spent a number of years studying the almost 1,300 acre Sherwood West Urban Reserve area and preparing a concept plan for that. So Metro Council, MPAC, and your board have all been briefed by Sherwood staff and electeds on their proposal and have also been briefed on the urban growth management decision process. So this map shows our urban and rural reserves around the entire metro region. So you can see the Sherwood West area highlighted there in blue. There are urban reserve areas around Washington County and Clackamas County and Multnomah County. And so we're not the only one that has urban reserves, but again, City of Sherwood is the only one that asked for an urban growth boundary expansion at this time. So your board, after receiving your briefing from City of Sherwood officials on July 16th, did prepare a letter of support for Sherwood's proposal. The key elements of your support letter were supportive of the work that they've done to prepare their concept plan and make the request to Metro Council for the expansion. Your board also encouraged Metro Council to consider selecting a higher growth rate for both population and employment, with the intent that it's better to be prepared for high growth in case that happens rather than being unprepared if it comes to pass. So as Stephen said, we received the Metro Growth Management Decision, Chief Operating Officer, and staff recommendations on August 26th. The key elements of this decision were to recommend that Metro Council should adopt the baseline forecast. Metro prepares 3 different forecasts for population and employment growth. There's the low growth, the baseline, and then the high growth. Baseline's in the middle. And so the Metro staff and CO recommendation says pick the middle, the baseline, for both housing and employment growth. The recommendation does recommend expanding the urban growth boundary to include the entire Sherwood West concept area, urban reserve area. The recommendation says that the housing need can be met by Sherwood's expansion and that the capacity available in Sherwood West supports what we need in order to grow the region. And that the Sherwood West industrial land addition is also warranted because while there's a lot of industrial land available around the region, much of that land is constrained or it's heavily parcelized or it has steep slopes, and therefore it's not well suited to the types of employment that we'd like to see in the region. Whereas the Sherwood West area has some large lot flat sites that can easily be consolidated or are already consolidated. The COO recommendation also contains potential conditions of approval for Metro Council to consider as a part of their decision. It is typical for Metro Council to apply conditions to the cities that receive UGB expansions. You may recall this happened in 2018 with the 4 cities that received expansions at that time. There were 4 topic areas proposed in the decision: a mix of housing types, meaning higher densities, housing affordability requirements, industrial site protections, so that means preserving that possibility for large lot industrial sites, and then an inclusive community engagement strategy. So these are all just potential topic areas. It doesn't necessarily propose what those conditions could be, and that's going to be a part of our conversation. So this slide summarizes some of the initial feedback that we've heard to the COO recommendation. There are some.
Could I stop you for a clarification on the 4 areas there? Previously, have you seen the density numbers be in these conditions brought forward? And I'm asking, is this an unusual situation to have it be so vague at this point?
I don't think it's unusual for it to be vague at this point. I'm not entirely sure if the 2018 conditions included specific density requirements. I know that they did include other pretty specific requirements for how comprehensive planning needed to occur, infrastructure analysis and things like that. But I'll look over my shoulder, Jessica.
We need you to come to the mic.
Jessica said she's looking right now, and so we will clarify if we find previous density requirements. And so I think what Commissioner Treese is asking, one of the things that's been floated around is that Sherwood West concept plan showed a possible range of housing units from, I think, 9 to 16 units per acre, somewhere in there. And so it's been floated around that Metro Council could require Sherwood to show 20 units per acre or 18 units per acre or something like that. And so there's some concern about
Developable acre.
Yes, yes. And so there's some concern about the compliance with that and whether or not that still meets what Sherwood had planned for their community through their process.
Thank you. That's
Mhm.
what I was.
But I have a clarifying question on this before we get into subsequent slides. This county has been through UGB, UGR, and UGB cycles before. And I certainly was as a Metro counselor, but I'm trying to make sure I note what is different in this cycle. So the mix of housing types with regard to density, the density part overall is not new to me. But the housing affordability requirements, I think, are new, but I need to confirm that.
I agree. I think that there are some ideas floated around about housing affordability requirements, which would require, for example, something like a certain percentage of units to be regulated affordable housing, affordable at certain income levels. We have not previously seen a condition like that applied to a UGB expansion. And I think there's some concerns again about the compliance aspect of that and how that could be implemented by the city.
So that's on number 2. But back on number 1, another thing that has changed since the last UGR, which was the full UGR was 2018.
Yes.
And that there were UGB expansions than the end of 2018. Because I was very busy finishing that work and the RTP adoption by the end of 2018. The middle housing legislation is another piece that is new since 2018. So statewide, there are requirements that enable middle housing, but in the metro region, and therefore in us as a county, there are requirements to allow for all 4 types of middle housing that are not required elsewhere in the state. So I don't know, for me, number 1 is overall density requirements are similar, but number 1 is different from the standpoint of this is the first UGR/UGB decision that is applying middle housing. So that's another, for me, a whole new element of experience with this UGR/UGB cycle. You with me, Commissioner Willie? Okay, because I know you've been through this process too.
And on the question of density as well, I shouldn't say always, but for many decades, there's been a state requirement that on an overall citywide or countywide basis, you are meeting a certain density for housing targets. So Washington County has one. The Metropolitan Housing Rule, exactly. And so we've always had a density requirement, but that number is lower than what we've seen floated around as a possible density requirement for Sherwood West. And so that's another piece of this. Sherwood's had a rule that they've tried to meet for their entire city for a number of years, and they're hearing a number much higher than that.
Yep. So it's for a long time, we were required as a region and a county to have multiple types of housing to satisfy the Metropolitan Housing Rule. So it couldn't all be single family units, SFUs, but middle housing has gotten much clearer. It's not just multifamily housing, or attached housing as it was before. It's now clearer around duplexes, quadplexes. So
Right.
that's a whole new part that we're experiencing together.
And thank you for bringing that up. It also, that middle housing piece also has driven the confusion, I believe, around what the density numbers in fact mean. So that's what's important for all of us to understand as well. And this, I anticipate, is going to be a big part of the discussion tomorrow night. So I'm just putting that out on the table.
Yeah, it throws a lot of complexity into our typical calculations. It used to be really straightforward to calculate density, but if now you could put up to 4 units on any single family lot, it makes it hard to do the numbers.
Well, and it's also developer dependent.
Yes.
So that adds to the fact that we don't know.
There's a difference between what you plan for and what actually gets
Yes.
implemented. There's a lot of
That's it.
uncertainty there, which is why I think people are concerned about the compliance on this. What happens if Sherwood plans for the best, but that's not what's delivered? And so it's complicated.
Yes, but, and it's important that we all understand that.
And I might add, if you recall, and I just realized we didn't include a copy of the Sherwood West concept plan in the packet here, but back when the city made their presentation to your board, they specifically called out that they had identified specific portions of the community plan area where middle housing would be specifically allowed and encouraged, and other areas that were intended ideally to remain more traditional single family.
But, okay, I think we need to step back for a second and confirm our language. Encouraged, I agree with. Allowed, middle housing is allowed everywhere that a single family housing unit is
Correct.
allowed. So I needed your articulation to say specifically enabled versus allowed, because it's
Correct.
allowed everywhere that a house is allowed.
Encouraged versus.
Encouraged. So,
Right.
but I'm fine with them saying, this is a great part of the community where we really hope that it'll be. So, yeah.
Right.
It's so bloody new.
It is. And there's a lot of questions out there. So
Well, sorry, I'll just say it now versus hold it till later. I really need a follow-up from this meeting. I need myself, but I think the entire board would benefit. I'm really proud of how the Washington County cities have handled UGB expansions while I was a Metro councilor to present. I mean, they've really done a good job, which means North Bethany by Washington County, South Cooper Mountain, South Hillsborough, and that includes Witch Hazel thrown in there, River Terrace 1.0, as well as they're planning work on 2.0, Cornelius, and Commissioner Willie, I can never remember the name of the new neighborhood that was built by Holt that begins with the letter L. That was a UGB expansion in 2018. And that neighborhood is built with middle housing that was not part of the thinking during the 2018 UGB cycle, was not quote unquote required. Okay. But it has all kinds of middle housing example, as does South Hillsborough. So I would really benefit from an email that pulls out those UGB expansion conditions for density specifically. And it might even help if the planners have any idea, there's what the condition was and what the overall area was built to in gross numbers.
So I'd like to ask Jessica to come to the table to talk just a little bit about the question that was raised. While she's coming to the table, the other,
What question? Which question? When I just asked?
no, the one I asked earlier about the historical piece on density.
Okay. I'll allow that.
Thank you. I should have asked you if it's okay.
Thank you, Commissioners. Jessica Pells, LUT Policy Analyst, for the record. I did find the 2018 decision, and they did include a condition for a minimum number of units for
Yes.
each expansion area.
Every UGB expansion does.
Yeah, and I think the question with the Sherwood one is what is shown in the concept plan. We've heard from Sherwood staff, they think doesn't accurately reflect the minimum number of homes that they want, or reflects the average minimum density. And so I think that's part of the problem that they're talking about with Metro staff.
Sounds like a difference of understanding.
Thank you.
Oh, to me.
No, I agree with you.
Okay, great.
We
Thank
agree.
you. Okay.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
Laurel Woods.
Laurel Woods.
And I believe that's built, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's.
I don't know if it's the entire expansion area or just a portion of it.
It appears, we just toured it a few weeks ago, and it appears that it's all built essentially. There are a few areas where I think some of the street infrastructure is still happening, but it's just about done.
Yeah.
It's
Which-
amazing.
Which is one reason, as we've had office conversations, me and various staff, from my experience as a Metro counselor, we always took tours around what has happened on the ground since the last UGB cycle. And we made sure MPAC and everybody knew that that was part of the Metro Council process. I'm dismayed that I have not heard of them doing that, because they should see Laurelwood. They should see it's a whole new Metro Council. They should see all these neighborhoods. And I think I would suggest that we draft a letter encouraging them and inviting them to do just that.
In conjunction with the city of Cornelius.
All of the cities, of course. Hillsborough, Cornelius, Washington County for Bethany and Tigard.
I have a question if we're going to leave clarity for
Where's-
meeting
Do you have something on this slide?
on the conditions.
Okay.
Previous.
And that is, I just wanted to point out the affordability condition. I would underline that there are no apparent opportunities for funding for that potential condition. So I just point that out to us here.
Yeah.
Unfunded mandate.
And so I
Okay.
just wanted to point that out as part of that condition.
Any last clarifying question for slide 13? Great. Now we'll move on. Thank you very much, staff.
So this slide summarizes some of the feedback that we've heard at a high level about this so far. And so from a county staff perspective, we support the recommendation to include Sherwood West. We think that City of Sherwood has done what they were supposed to do. They prepared a concept plan that met the requirements and will continue to work with the city as they move through their process. County staff and others have raised some concerns about the growth rates and assumptions that were used by Metro. Specifically, there's concerns about adopting a baseline growth rate that may be lower than what we actually see happen. And there's some risk with planning for lower growth when you end up with higher growth. This can be things like infrastructure is undersized from what it actually needed to be. And we just want to make sure that we're not missing those opportunities to best utilize public funds and developer contributions. But on the other side, there's some concern about adopting a high growth rate scenario as well. Specifically, what people are concerned about is that if Metro looks at that higher growth rate, they need to now find room for more housing units. And the concern is that that could result in possibly a higher density requirement for City of Sherwood beyond what their concept plan had planned for, or some other unintended consequences, because as a part of the staff work that Metro did, they didn't test a high growth scenario along with a a more mixed housing growth scenario at the same time. And so there just wasn't some technical analysis behind what that could look like, and that opens up some uncertainty for us. And again, what we just talked about in the previous slide, there's a lot of concern about what these conditions could be, and so there's concern about this high growth could result in some additional conditions. The city of Sherwood is concerned about potential conditions requiring that additional housing density and about the regulated affordable housing requirements, as we discussed.
So this is a 20-year plan, right?
Yes.
Okay. And we get to renew it every 6 years.
Yeah.
So basically, they are piling the growth projection on Sherwood.
The gap.
Yeah, so they're saying if we have a baseline growth, Sherwood can absorb all that. If we have,
No, if we have a baseline growth, the current UGB plus Sherwood,
can absorb it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But where I was going with that is if they would consider a higher growth rate, then they'd have to consider where else are we going to put the growth? And that's what they don't want to do.
I don't know if I'd frame it as that's what they don't want to do. I just think that the analysis that's been conducted so far on the Metro staff side more supports that baseline growth, which is a little bit pessimistic compared to what we've seen before. And so then they're matching that gap, as the chair said, with what the city of Sherwood is asking for, as well as what we know we can fit through redevelopment within our centers and corridors. We have a lot of unrealized housing capacity within the region. I mean, all along TV Highway, we have a plan designation that allows 100 units an acre. That hasn't been built. And so we know that we could absorb it within centers and corridors, but that's a different type of product than what Sherwood can build within the UGB expansion area. And that's where these conversations get complicated, because now we're talking about building different types of housing to meet different needs. And that's different than just talking about the absolute numbers.
Can I add a little bit more here? They could choose to go with the high forecast as well.
Mhm.
The requirement is no matter where they end up, they have to choose a point.
Mhm.
So they have these three scenarios and they'll back into the point. It has to be accommodated within the existing UGB plus expansions.
Mhm.
Okay? And remember, Metro is restricted in terms of where they can condition development to UGB expansion areas as well as centers and corridors due to a measure that we voters passed in 2002. So all the inner neighborhoods, the only thing that can affect redevelopment on inner neighborhoods is middle housing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned about if we do exceed the baseline growth rate. I mean, we're constantly talking about the cost of housing, and affordable is very difficult to achieve when we've got these increasing land costs and construction costs and all those things. And then we put another layer on it that says, we don't think we're going to grow any higher than this, and then we do.
Mhm.
And we don't have any escape clause in there.
So we do have an escape clause. Metro is required to do this every 6 years. They're required to do a full UGR, but they can do an additional one at any point in between. They've also done an analysis of what did the UGRs and UGBs say versus history, and they've been within 3% or lower with each one of them. So, and I'll also go on a limb. I don't have confidence, full 100% confidence like everything else I've just talked about, or high degree, maybe not 100%. We've always struggled with having affordable housing ranges. It's always existed. What's different this cycle is the current council seems to have provided direction to their staff to include conditions with regard to the range of affordability through 120% of area median income. Okay. Do you need to correct anything I just said?
Nope.
Okay.
That was
There
all
is a
correct.
possibility it needs to be corrected, and so I'm trying to make sure I'm reassuring staff.
Well, and you made an interesting point, which is that Metro doesn't have to wait the 6 years to revisit this. And actually that happened in recent history, as I'm sure many of you recall. In 2015, they completed the 6-year growth management cycle and adopted an urban growth report and decided not to expand the urban growth boundary. Part of the challenge in 2015 was that we were relying on recession data to make a lot of decisions. And everybody said, we were in a recession. This doesn't seem accurate as to what's going to be happening in the next few years. Let's do this again in 3 years. And that's why we did a full urban growth management decision in 2018 rather than waiting till 2021. And then everything ended up a little bit off. So here we are in 24.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm so glad I'm not a Metro counselor anymore.
So we just talked a bit about these scenarios and the growth rates. And so the purpose of this table in the presentation is this is giving a little bit of information as to how the sausage is made in the background with Metro technical staff and some of the analysis that they're conducting. So with 3 different growth rates, low, baseline, and high, Metro staff determined 3 different types of growth scenarios that could go along with that. And so these 3 scenarios they looked at testing were, one was called following in the footsteps. And so that meant kind of how we've grown historically, kind of a mix of the types of people, the types of households, the types of demand. Then there's a new normal, which is based on what we've seen in more recent years as far as more demand for, let's say, things like townhomes and other products that we've seen kind of a more of a mix, middle housing being a part of that consideration as well. And then there was a scenario tested called strong urban market. I was joking around that this is like the Portlandia scenario, young people moving to Portland to retire. It's a lot of demand for more smaller households without children, lower wage kind of service type jobs. So with these options, there were 9 possible scenarios you could have run, right? 3 growth rates, 3 types of growth scenarios. Metro staff ran 4 of them. And so they picked 4 to run. And these are just, think of them as sensitivity testing. We're seeing what happens with the region's housing supply. We're seeing what's absorbed under these different possibilities. So you can see in these scenarios that there is a capacity deficit or surplus for single unit detached and middle housing or multifamily over in the right 2 columns. Under some of these scenarios, they're showing a gap, which is the red. That's the need for different types of housing. And in some, we have a surplus, and that's when the text is in black. So none of these are actually what is in the COO recommendation. What ended up in the COO recommendation is most similar to number 3, which is that new normal with the baseline growth, but it's not exactly what they ended up picking because, again, some further technical analysis was conducted in the background. So sensitivity testing, think about what could happen.
I have a question on this chart.
Mhm.
If I understand the chart right, between 1 and 3, 1, 2, and 3, well, all of them actually, this chart suggests that they're interested in seeing middle housing expand by 7% from 14, which I think is current, to even more. And I'm wondering, given your professional experiences working with the development community, does that seem to be following current trends?
I think that's a really good question, and we're trying to do a better job of tracking middle housing development. It certainly has picked up. It took a little while, I think. Well, it took a little while for us to adopt the regulations for middle housing, and so those have only been in place for a few years. But in recent years, we've seen a lot more interest in developing middle housing product types. Townhomes are a middle housing product type, and anyone who's spent any time driving around new growth areas knows there's a lot of townhomes being built. They kind of hit that right price point for a lot of buyers these days. They meet density requirements. Builders are very comfortable with creating that product. So I don't think it's unreasonable that we could see more of a share of middle housing moving into the future.
And I'm wondering, if anyone, I'm assuming that Metro has this by working with you for North Bethany, Beaverton for South Cooper Mountain, Tigard with River Terrace 1.0 and then 2.0 concept planning, as well as Cornelius with Laurelwood, that they've looked at the actual development permits that have been secured and can demonstrate that that this 14% is the result of increased growth since 2018. And that's 6 years and it is new. So that this increase to 21% is a very comfortable increase. I don't know if they're going to be getting any testimony on that or if we're going to get criticized for supporting or weighing in on such a condition, but that's why I was interested in hearing some real data around middle housing permits.
And we can work on that as a part of the follow-up. It may take us a little while to put this together though, so it may be a later follow-up on what we've actually seen as far as the middle housing products. It's sometimes
Like
a little
later between now
in a
and
few weeks.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
We can do it in a few weeks.
Not by recommendation. No.
Right, possibly not by
Before-
tomorrow when impact happens.
But before the council has to make their final decision.
Well, yeah, we can work on a little bit of this. It gets a little bit complicated, I'll just say, with the tracking because we're also seeing middle housing products going in existing neighborhoods, infill type
yeah,
middle
it's
housing
enabled.
developments. And so
Yeah.
teasing it out from what's in the UGB expansions versus infill. But we can certainly look at that.
Well, their UGR applies to the whole
It does.
region as well. So I think it's homogeneous apples to apples thing versus apples to orange.
And we've been working on our data on this so that we can more easily capture middle housing in our database software in the background. So
That I think would help us.
Yeah, and it might be illustrative too. I know obviously Tigard and Beaverton are right in the middle of developing their previous UGB expansion areas. And I know in both cases, they had a developer that was interested in developing a middle housing product specifically on single family lots. And so they have implemented a number of duplex units and triplex units, as well as more traditional townhome units that were probably part of the original plan.
Yeah.
So I think we could probably check in with a couple of the cities fairly quickly and to see if they have access to some fairly quick information about specifically in these UGB expansion areas, how that's going.
Yep.
And it is I'll just add, it is a very, very much an untested market. My understanding from the developer who was developing those middle housing units is they had really hoped to reach an affordability point that was in the high 300s to low 400s, and they haven't been able to get down that low. Just the price of development all compiled up hasn't quite gotten them to that point yet. But
Well,
the units seem to be selling.
it is possible. Having my first home purchase was a garden style condo. And I want to move back to that.
There's a lot to be said for it, yes.
yes. So then similarly on the employment or industrial land capacity, they did a similar type of analysis. And so this is showing that gap using the low growth, baseline, and high growth. There's been a lot of discussion on the industrial land analysis, and it's really complicated. We have a really good understanding of housing. It's easy to conceptualize what housing looks like. We know about how much land it requires. Even if we start adding in the middle housing products, we just have a good understanding of this. Employment types and land use is so incredibly variable, and a lot of it just depends on the demand at that given moment. So it's really challenging to predict. As I mentioned earlier, we know that a lot of the industrial land supply is pretty parcelized, meaning there's a lot of pieces of it, but they're very small and they're maybe not particularly useful to particular types of development. They may be far away from transportation facilities that are needed for whatever product is going to be produced and moved around. They may have some steep slopes. They may be brownfields. They may have other environmental constraints. And so they're just even though they show up as being zoned for industrial, they're going to be a part of the capacity, but they're not necessarily what somebody actually needs in order to meet that need. So this particular UGR, when we're talking about what's new, I think there's been much more discussion about industrial land and how we evaluate industrial land than we've seen in some of the previous cycles, at least some of the recent cycles, which have focused more on housing needs specifically. So part of this was used to justify the Sherwood concept plan, that it does have those large lot sites that could be suitable for some industrial demand that can't be met elsewhere. So we are back at the timeline. So tomorrow, MPAC discussion with Metro staff and the COO to discuss the COO recommendation. We're missing one meeting in there, which is on September 12th. Metro Council will have a work session. I think that was the rescheduled work session that was supposed to happen last week and was canceled and rescheduled. And then September 18th, MTAC will, which is the staff committee associated with MPAC, will have their discussion and make a recommendation to MPAC. September 19th, the Committee on Racial Equity will make a recommendation to Metro Council. September 25th is a key date for Commissioner Treese because that's when MPAC will meet again and make their recommendation to Council. Metro Council will then have a series of meetings and work sessions and hearings to talk about this. They're anticipating their first reading on their ordinance will be on November 21st, and that'll be their first hearing. And then they are anticipating a second reading and decision on December 5th.
Yeah, so for your follow-up information, that latter one that we were just talking about deadline-wise before November 21st would be most convenient.
And then we're back to the questions. And so one of the questions we actually thought about adding here was, does your board want to send a letter? And it sounds like there may be some interest in drafting a letter to Metro Council as well.
I have a question on this slide. It's a clarifying question. Housing affordability requirements. There are currently no staff recommended conditions. Are there rules in place on housing affordability requirements?
Through Metro or the state or?
Either one.
Not that we know of specifically relating to UGB expansions. And so that's something that would be new if it was applied here. Senate Bill 1537, which was the quick UGB expansion legislation passed earlier this year, allows for up to a 100-acre quick UGB expansion. And that did require, if a city chose that path, that they do meet certain affordability requirements. And so that's something new that hasn't really been tested yet and isn't a part of the Metro decision, but I think that's where people are looking for inspiration about.
It's also does not apply to the Sherwood concept.
Correct. This is not a quick UGB expansion available through that legislation, but that legislation did have language in it that I think is now being used to consider a condition for Sherwood West.
So thank you for being a subject matter expert on that. I do not do a good job of following bill numbers versus topics. So the new housing production strategy bill, I can't remember the name of it, but it's my understanding that this UGR is the first one since that bill was passed. And Metro, through this UGR, is trying to satisfy, through those first two rows, their housing needs analysis per that bill. And I forgot, oh, maybe I have it here. No, I didn't bring it. The flyer on the Oregon housing
Yes.
needs analysis. It's
We
in the
didn't,
packet.
it's in the
Yeah.
packet, yes.
So are the rules for all of that stuff done?
No, the rulemaking process is underway right now. And so there's quite a bit of uncertainty as to how this will work. Our understanding as of right now is that jurisdictions within the state will have to follow this housing needs, housing production strategy. As a part of the identification of need, Metro will do that for the metro area, and
That's
Metro
at the
will
top.
use, yes, at the top, and Metro will use this urban growth report and the technical analysis behind it to determine our housing need and then allocate that out to the jurisdictions within Metro.
Will Metro do that or the Oregon Department of Administrative Services?
Oregon Department of Administrative Services will be setting the requirements, but these Metro numbers will be used to set that allocation. So
But we
part of the
don't
rulemaking will determine how that happens.
But the direction doesn't come from Metro on that issue.
Correct.
It comes from the
It
state.
Came from the state, yes.
Just-
But this is the number Metro's
I
Metro's
understand it.
need.
It's,
yes.
it's.
Metro right now is required to identify a regional need.
Yes.
They are not currently enabled to direct it at the city county level.
Correct. And
/ jurisdictional level.
And that's what the rulemaking will settle.
I'm not interested in Metro having that local control. Okay? That's why I wanted to raise it on this slide. I'm a firm believer in local control when it gets down to what are neighborhoods going to look like and where might they be, with the caveat that middle housing is enabled everywhere. So we need your help to figure out if we have a discussion and decide on a board position with regard to that versus it just being done to us without us getting to use our voice. Additionally, why this is also pertinent to this slide is I'm wondering how Metro can possibly require housing affordability requirements if there are no rules in place to require it. And given everything they've said about the spend out of the affordable housing bond measure, I'm wondering what tools or grant resources they have to actually incentivize said requirements. Do you know something I don't know? Because if you do, please share it, because I don't know.
No.
No.
Okay, so, I'm a little lost at this point and need your help and Commissioner Teresa's help with regard to bringing this back up to board comments, because this is an area of concern that I have, given all that's been said. And how do we use our voice given the decision timeline with regard to that? So I'll just leave that to come back to.
And I think we do need to come back to that. That's probably another topic for an entire briefing where we sit up here for 2 hours and talk about it, because there's a lot happening with that housing rulemaking, and we do have staff tracking it, and it's happening at the same time as the UGR
Yes,
and they're
but
connected.
irrespective of the rulemaking, what I'm getting at is they want to put in a condition before that process is clearly defined through the rules, let alone adopted.
So I would ask this board to consider that that condition is not acceptable. So that's, to your point,
So put a caveat, put a pin on it, and when we have questions for board consideration, please bring that up
okay.
for us to close on during
Okay,
that.
yep.
Okay? This is why this is a long topic today. Yes, perfect.
And I really appreciate the level of discussion here.
Do any board members have any other questions on what this slide is about? Okay, next slide.
I think this is it actually, right?
Okay,
Oh, wait, here we
so
are back to the question.
roundtable time, round robin time. We already know Commissioner Teresa is going to bring us back for an ask. That's great. You haven't used up your turn though. So commissioners, questions and comments.
I'll ask a question. You could go back to the last slide. The housing affordability requirements, you said no staff recommended conditions. And then in the packet, there was a bit more detailed of the recommendations, potential conditions to consider. And I really like one of the things, what you said. I mean, I agree with you and I follow what you're recommending. This might be a bit unrealistic to expect. But what you said here was housing affordability. Metro could set out a conditions to guide the work of Metro and Sherwood together to ensure housing affordability and not just leave it up to the market. I like that last part. How do we, because what I hear in the community is there are a lot of houses, but they're really not affordable. So how do we make sure that whatever houses that get built, they're actually affordable, the community that wants to purchase, that should be purchasing. While I'm in support of what you're recommending in that condition, I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the part about not leaving it to the market. We need to figure out how to control so that we create robust homeowners in Washington County, throughout Washington County.
And Commissioner, you raised a good point that I want to clarify. We should have been more articulate on this slide, but these were county staff potential considerations. And so when we say staff recommended, we meant county staff in this particular slide. Yeah.
So what is the Metro recommendation?
So the Metro recommendation, as Commissioner Fye just articulated, is really to have Metro work with the city of Sherwood to help ensure that there will be some affordability requirements within the community to help ensure that there is that range of affordabilities.
And just to follow up on this, we haven't seen any specific conditions proposed by Metro staff yet.
Right.
Everything that we've heard is from discussions with Sherwood City staff, Metro staff, but we haven't seen anything in writing. So we're anticipating that tomorrow's impact will have a more robust discussion on potential conditions and actual words for those.
Again, if I can articulate in tying to your thoughts here, I think that we can recommend that there are discussions about affordable housing opportunities that include the necessary funding. Because I'm not comfortable personally telling Sherwood, yes, you have to have X amount of affordable housing when there's no funding opportunity. We know how difficult it is to build affordable housing and the with baklava type of layering that needs to go into getting that funding. So to put it as a condition, I'm very uncomfortable with. To put it as a recommendation for continued look and understanding that it requires funding, I would be more comfortable with. That's my view on that condition.
So page 73 of the packet includes a summary of 4 bullets of recommendations from Metro staff to the Metro Council. Okay. So the second bullet is that housing affordable one. So let's make sure in terms of going through this, you're the first one. So we're on your round. Are you thumbs up on, are you supportive of all those conditions or I need you each to weigh in on the conditions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mix of housing types. I'm in support of Washington County's staff recommendation as listed here. The housing affordability requirements, I'm in support of being like the conditions not being too rigid for Sherwood, But I do like the part of not leaving it up to the market. However, we can creatively put our guardrails around housing affordability and once these houses are up. So I'm in support of that. While I also support, there's no recommendation for this particular piece, so I think if I could be more succinct, I think I'm saying I'm supportive of no staff recommending conditions, but the aspirations that I would like to see for us to promote and to recommend is that we put a guardrails around affordability requirements moving forward. So it's more particularly around the market.
I'm confused. We have information in the memo from our staff. This slide is, they are recommending to us, they're not weighing in. We need to weigh in on these 4 bullets in the memo.
I see. Okay, thank you, Chair.
So does everybody have the memo in front of you? Because it's in the packet.
And it's
I have 2 memos up going.
page 2 of the memo.
Right.
So
It's right.
if I could maybe rephrase to make sure my notes are correct in what you were saying. So I think what you're saying is you're not in favor of very prescriptive affordable housing requirements for the city of Sherwood, but you're supportive of continuing the conversations and possibly identifying funding to support regulated affordable housing.
Very well said. Thank you.
That's what I wrote down.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love when you
Do that for me.
Yeah.
What is that?
I was trying to summarize and make sure my notes were accurate. I think what Commissioner Fye was saying is that she is not supportive of prescriptive requirements for regulated affordable housing within Sherwood West, but she is supportive of continued conversations around how to provide affordable housing and identify funding for it.
Okay, so no requirement.
Correct.
And that, I think, sort of dovetails nicely with Commissioner Teresa's recommendation, no mandates without funding. So, and I was going to add, I'll have to go back and look again, but I believe the North Bethany UGB expansion ordinance back in 2002, I want to say, may have had some encouragements around affordable housing. And so we did develop an affordable housing guideline document that had some incentives like density bonuses and things that would encourage potentially higher density housing that should be therefore more affordable. And I don't recall that any developers actually took us up on that, but we did the work and had the capacity and capability.
It was all encouraged. There was no requirement. So therefore it was not a condition for construction. Right.
And
There was a requirement for the jurisdiction to pursue enabling, but they didn't have to enable it, implement it.
And I would just comment that in 2024, the situation is so different than it was in 2002 that I'd be uncomfortable unless I saw the language with adopting any of that previous language. So I just,
So for sake of clarity, we only got through 2 of the 4 bullets with Commissioner Fye.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in support of the recommendation for
large lot.
large sites. However, the inclusive community engagement, could you articulate why you didn't recommend Metro's recommendation on this part? Seems in alignment of our community engagement model.
Yeah, I think we were just saying that we didn't have any specific recommendations that we would propose. That doesn't mean that we were not supportive of the Metro conditions that were suggested or outlined briefly in the recommendation. So we
They're
do
just
support
not
inclusive community
making a
engagement.
recommendation to us. It's up for us to decide.
Okay.
And it's not that Sherwood wouldn't do inclusive community engagement. It's that we wouldn't we're not recommending a mandate on how they do that engagement. So, yeah.
And
No, that's not what you said earlier.
Oh,
Your staff recommendation,
Is
you've
no-
made no comment.
no comments, right? Yep.
Right? So you could substitute no comment for each of those.
Um,
We can remain silent on it.
um, I think, I like Washington County's community engagement model, which also is an alignment about centering marginalized communities and really having a robust community member engagement residents. So while some of these language seem bit focused, and I'm looking at the metro recommendation around inclusive community engagement. They're recommending that Metro Council could consider conditions for a broad-based approach to community engagement when Sherwood develops their comprehensive plan for Sherwood West that includes community members, community-based or representing historically marginalized and interested community. So I just want, I would recommend that we make a recommendation that is in alignment of our Washington County specific practice around how we engage residents and community members. I could vaguely remember Sherwood's engagement was pretty robust. There was no red flags, as I could remember, of any population being missed. But saying no, staff recommend, like, while the conditions seem like too rigid for me, we could make a recommendation that is in alignment, that isn't something that is gonna require them to do something specific. So that's just my recommendation, that we figured out a language that is in alignment with Washington County's engagement model that says Sherwood will do this, and this is what we feel comfortable as a board.
So to put that crisply, yes, she's in support of that condition. Next. Anyone? There's three of you.
I'll go through mine. I support both of the staff recommendations for mixed housing types and industrial site protection. I think I've made it clear on my housing affordability.
So compared to this bullet list, they've repeated the same one here.
Okay.
Okay, so for the metro conditions, for the first bullet, you're a yes. For the third bullet, you're a yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And on the last one, inclusive community engagement, I think our recommendation easily could be, we support the work that Sherwood has done in reaching out to their community and recommend they continue that. I believe in part that's what you said.
No, she read exactly what was in the recommendation, which is different.
No, no, that's not correct. I read it and then I articulated, I think it's in alignment with what you said, right? I mean, the staff is out what you heard.
They haven't commented. They have provided no further recommendation to us. The recommendation from Metro staff to the Metro Council requires that Sherwood also work with CBOs and others to include people who don't necessarily reside or receive current city notifications. So it's a bit more expansive, which is what I heard you be in support of.
Well, we have the recording. I don't remember verbatim I said, but.
Commissioner Willie?
Well, I agree with 1 and 3. And I think I'm referring to page 25 in the packet, which is exactly the suggestions that you said was on another document.
In the full packet, it's
Right.
page 73.
So then the question I have is on this one, you're saying, and we've had this conversation, I'm just making sure I understand what we've concluded here. No staff recommendation, but in the verbiage, you do make a recommendation. You said Metro Council could set out conditions to guide the work. So
They-
it's kind of a recommendation.
This isn't,
but it
this
a
isn't
recommend-
Washington County content. This is
Yeah. this-
Metro staff content. This bullet list.
We were using it as an example of what Metro Council could do based on what they've prepared.
Okay,
And that's
And this
actual
language
text.
actually is copied
COO
from the COO. Yeah.
yeah,
recommendation.
okay, I'm sorry.
Blended
Didn't
with
read the
your word.
entire document.
No, those words are from the
okay.
CO.
This is in the from the CO recommendation, but we were using it illustratively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, I agree with your 4 points.
And on the housing affordability piece, would you like to support the Metro condition as is or add in the no mandates without funding?
Yeah, definitely agree with you.
Great.
No mandates.
No mandates.
And on inclusive community engagement, do you want to exercise your voice at all?
Well, I think what Pam said was
Sherwood,
sufficient. I mean,
Yep.
you know, to continue the good work that you've been doing in the inclusive departments.
Yep. Okay. Commissioner Rogers.
Well, as usual, you never bring anything that's too easy to us. And it's kind of awkward in many ways because there's two things in my mind that we're dealing with. One is Sherwood, which is in front of us, but I always look at things to the future. That's just the latest one. Whatever we do as a guide, because this is the first under the new middle housing standards, is probably going to apply to any future kinds of activity in Washington County. So why do I even bring that up? Because one, whatever things we talk about probably are going to come back to haunt the board at some later date in terms of what you said, unless your faces are all different, maybe are you still in the same place? So and I'll get specific on Sherwood, specifically for the future, I like the baseline approach. That's one of the questions. This is really difficult on cities when you start doing high density, high growth, because they don't know what middle housing is going to do to them. They're struggling with that at great lengths. As far as the work for affordability, we all want that, and we encourage, and we should encourage every one of us as partners, not just us, but cities as well as affordability.
Encourage, but no mandates without funding is,
It's perfect, yeah.
yep.
The whole issue on the inventory, and this you'll hear in every economic development group, is there lots of economic development land? Yeah, if you're going to put a plant of less than an acre and produce, I don't know what that would be, but there's nothing aggregated. And so the third issue is important. Fourth one, I really like Commissioner Teresa's approach to it. That's really the way it should be. And that's trying to say something other than that, I think is appropriate. So I would say, forgetting Sherwood, I would say that in regard to the future or any activity that Metro would have. Now, specifically to Sherwood, because this talks about Sherwood. That's why I get a little awkward, just personally, because I really believe in home rule. I really think they have the ability to do what they need to do locally. And as of this date, Pam, you might know better. I don't know what they're really going to ultimately land on. You think that they have input, but really they're the ultimate inputter because they can just withdraw. What they're interested in is a density lot less than being proposed. If they don't get that, they'll probably withdraw. They want that large development of the industrial because they think the region needs it and they need it. If we weren't to support it, they just withdraw. So that's why I find it awkward. The first part where I said to Washington County, I don't have any issues with, because we're talking with our partners and saying these are good things to do with the constraints. Second part in regard to Sherwood, I feel a little awkward in making recommendations where I don't know really what they are. I don't know what they're going to do, and Pam, you might know, but I think they're evolving right now and saying, where do we want to land? So we could go with recommendations being asked, only to have them say, gee, county, why are you doing what you're doing? Because that's not what we're at all. You're kind of micromanaging us. Why don't you support us? You know, and so that's where I'm at with that issue.
If I might respond to
Please,
that,
yeah,
I
no,
think that there is a lot of discussion and things are evolving, but it's as much around definition of terms that we talked about earlier
Okay.
in relationship to middle housing and those types of pieces that make it difficult. But I think if we talk about recommending the Sherwood concept plan and their density recommendations, that gives us the flexibility to go with what their recommendations.
I thought you were talking about industrial sites.
I was talking about industrial.
I'm
sites.
sorry.
But
I'm
her
sorry.
point is well taken on the.
So I'm trying to get clear on
Thank you.
you and industrial sites.
Okay.
Yeah. On industrial sites, whether it be in the city of Hillsborough, Beaverton, Tualatin, or Sherwood, I think we should support anything that aggregates large industrial tracts.
Yep.
So I think that's,
Got it.
if our statement to Metro is not just inclusive. And again, my brain might be not functioning the way the rest of you, but I'm looking at what's a county statement regarding where we're at. Large industrial sites, we would support that no matter where it's at. We need industrial growth, right?
Yep.
And Sherwood fits into that because they're saying that. In regard to the housing, and I understand,
I'm sorry.
I know you talked with Tim and I talked with Tim, and he's not knowing exactly where they're gonna land at this point. You might have more update, but would we do the same thing in Hillsborough, Beaverton, Dalton, if they came with something? And that's what I'm asking. Would we defer if Hillsborough said, I can't, I don't
But
want
that isn't what's before us today.
It's not what's before us, but I'm just saying, thinking of
And
the
you're
future.
between us and a break, so that's why I'm trying to close this.
And I also
You can
think,
take a break. We can
I-
keep talking.
I also think it's different in this particular situation because of the lack of clarity right now.
Yes.
So,
Well said. Yes.
Okay, so I'll go. I'm fine on the mix of housing, as most of my colleagues are. On housing affordability, I'm right there with, yes, we want to see more affordable housing in the region and encourage that, but no mandates without funding. And they can't say, well, that's one reason why we want to make changes with the SHS funding, because I know with forecasts, the early days of hearing from the Metro economist on forecasts that there isn't any additional funding to redirect. So we're either going to have to reduce our goals on addressing homelessness on our streets and in our communities, or we're going to achieve affordable housing goals, but it's not as simple as just capture and build. The industrial site stuff, like the majority of the commission set on that. On the inclusive community engagement, what we're talking about here is a neighborhood that, it's large scale. 1,291 acres is a large UGB expansion. I think, though, I haven't seen a table that goes back over history. And so I'm actually in support of, like with Commissioner Fye, on the inclusive community engagement and the CBO and tribe historically marginalized communities, because now is the time to make sure we've the community of Sherwood has heard from voices that would like to live in Sherwood, but don't currently have the ability to live in Sherwood. Now, they may have done that already with the concept plan, okay? Or think that they have done, but the Metro Council hasn't seen it demonstrated. So that's where I have to assume that the Metro Council hasn't seen that demonstrated and therefore is going to require that through the comprehensive planning stage to make sure that that's done. I'm fine with that, right? It's just a planning step. Get more information. Don't we all reserve the right to get smarter? So that's where I think that is a healthy request. Though I respect that three of you aren't quite there. So if we could, so you wanted to check in on, or through the course of our conversation, we wanted to check in on the specific conditions. We've given direction for our MPAC liaison. I need you to go back to the question for board consideration slide, please. So we've given specific content to our MPAC liaison for meetings this month, and we've provided comment with regard to formalizing that input on a potential letter. Now, but you haven't, I'm in support of the baseline, as is Commissioner Rogers, but I haven't heard the baseline thought from the three of you.
Based on the way that we discussed that, I would be comfortable with baseline given the way it's not feedback. By the way, we've had this conversation, I'm supporting it.
I support the baseline as well, based on, again, based on the fact that it's a risk reward type of situation. And I think that, and we want to get this over the end line as well. So I'm in support of that.
Good, thorough conversation. Commissioner Treese, do you have any other questions?
I do have a question. Tomorrow night is our discussion night.
Mm-hmm.
If there are significant changes that I hear tomorrow night, may I work with LUT staff to get that communication back to everybody here? That's how I would like to handle.
I think you're required to.
Well, yeah. I didn't, the reason
The problem that you have, which is why we've spent the time to go over this in detail, and I know I've kept my tally here, is you only have September 17th. So what we're saying is, yes, we are, through these notes, yes, we are in favor of MPAC recommending 3 of the 4 bullets. Okay.
And what I will do is work with staff to summarize the discussion from tomorrow night for your information.
I'm comfortable that MPAC's going to go over all kinds of nuance, and that will have to come back to us in October.
Okay. For a letter to council.
You just added that piece in.
For potential.
So on the topic of letters, we've given our direction to our MPAC liaison and to our staff. I think we should entertain a letter, and I'm more than happy to work with Grace to develop such a letter to encourage the council to come and tour UGB expansion areas, all of which happen to be in Washington County in recent time. So I'll work on that for next Tuesday. I don't think that we need to write a letter for our summary, but you're going to figure that out through the MPAC process. And therefore, we will come back to it no sooner than October 1st. Because you got to pay attention to our meeting calendar. Anything else on this topic? It's a big hairy UGR this year, that's for sure. So,
Thank you for your time.
okay, at this juncture, we're going to take a 15-minute break and then reconvene at 20 minutes to the hour, and then we'll finish up with our last topic of today's meeting. Thank you.
Stephen, did you see my request? Or did I even send it? About meeting at,
So we have our celebration. I'm planning to listen to all of the star about
I'm not sharing him.
Not sharing.
All right, welcome back, commissioners. Back to you, Chair Harrington.
Yes, thank you, Clerk Moss. We are back from break and our last topic today is board and leadership communication. You want to start with board first or leadership first? How's
Leadership.
leadership feeling?
Get ready.
Okay, we're gonna,
I'm gonna put my head down because I don't.
we're gonna start with Clean Water Services, then go
Good,
legal,
thank
then
you.
go CAO.
Ours is really simple. We're just really excited about the emergency management planning, and we're very thankful for the county and the emergency management team and to invite us and to allow us to participate. The employees are excited about this level of planning, and we have a lot more that we need to do. And Elizabeth is working on getting us an emergency manager for Clean Water Services to really augment this planning that we need to do. So we're really excited that the board is interested in, especially the earthquake planning and as well as all of the other annexes. But yeah, we're on a good track, I think. Yeah. National preparedness. Yeah.
Great. Great. Well, I know we're all looking forward to our CWS Learning Day coming up in November. So great. Are we passing around coffee?
That's what I was wondering.
We're giving Nafisa back.
I feel like I
We didn't get the memo. Evidently.
My apologies. Yes, coffee.
Okay, we got everybody's attention now?
I-
Legal, it's yours.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. Sort of following up on Mr. Nelson's presentation this morning in the area of tax, I wanted to let you know that this is the week where we start our tax foreclosure process, where we file a complaint with the court listing the properties where we have delinquent taxes. I believe there's about 30 on that list. Unclear right now how many are residential, but I wanted to take this time to remind you as facilities and A&T were before your board not too long ago to talk about our One Washington County approach to making sure connecting with the residents who are on the residential property owners who are on that list to try and connect them to resources to find ways to help them get out of delinquent status and stay in their home. So that work is just starting about now. I also wanted to let you know, you may have seen in the paper an article about the North Plains lawsuit, the referendum. We're looking into that a little more closely, and we'll have some further communication with you on it later this week. Other than that, I'm looking forward to going to the LUT barbecue on Thursday. I'm sure it's on many of your calendars as well, and that's it for me.
Thursday, we
You can miss it.
have a round
Oh, the
table,
afternoon.
so we're
Never
gonna
mind, I won't go, but if you're listening, you should go.
And
on Wednesday too.
Yes.
So-
Save us food.
actually, I believe it's tomorrow, September 11th. So if it's on your calendars, and this is
So today's Tuesday.
Yep.
After we finish this section of our agenda, I believe we'll be adjourned for the day. Tomorrow is Wednesday, where we have both the Emergency Management Fair, which I'll talk about, as well as an AOC District 8 meeting, which is much of the day. Then on Thursday, we have a board roundtable. It is a very full day as well. It's a busy board week.
It's a busy board week, and so I will draw your attention to another event that is happening, and it sounds like will not coincide with your calendars tomorrow, Wednesday, September 11th, and that is when the LUT department is celebrating turning 40. As part of context and history, in 1984, our land use and transportation was officially named a department within Washington County after the merger of planning and public works. LUT has spent decades, as your board is aware, focused on safety and welcoming and creating an economic viable community. So this is a time for staff to get to celebrate and get together. Chair, as you indicated, the board is very busy tomorrow. So I just want to lift this up that this was an invite sent to the board, but your calendars are already full. I'd like to touch briefly on the Washington County Data Equity Assessment project. This is one of the ARPA funded projects. Last week, one Washington County team or a cross-functional team launched the county's first data equity assessment, and this is in partnership with Portland State University School of Social Work. The launch is a key investment of your ARPA Community Resilience Framework. The goal of this project is to advance data equity to build improved, resilient data systems and processes to transform data processes across the county. So this is truly a One Washington County approach. In many of our boards or commissions or community meetings, quite frequently we're asked, what's the data tell us? How can you disaggregate data by race? How are you using data to inform? And so this is such a key, while it may appear to be an internal system improvement, this is really essential work to modernize the county and provide equitable practices moving forward, that we can have those robust conversations on what is our data, who do we serve, how do we need to improve our services for equitable service delivery within the county. Deflection update. On Friday, I believe you received a deflection update just for members of our community, and also your board learned yesterday from our deflection operations team that so far 4 people have qualified for deflection, and that's out of 14 total citations, and 2 haven't officially enrolled in the program. So due to community interest, you will continue to receive those updates, and I will also provide you routine updates through leadership updates. And that concludes my update.
Thank you very much. Board members, who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So it's been a busy week and it'll continue to be a busy week. The last Wednesday, I attended the ARMDAC meeting. We discussed a few things. They elected new officers, which are the same officers for the coming year. A big point of discussion was the neighborhood streets program, and I'm just going to pass out to you a new door hanger that's going out in support of the neighborhood streets program. They're also talking about a possible recommendation of policy changes on this program back to the board. They're starting the investigation into whether or not neighborhood streets programs should be reduced from a 67% agreement to 51, and also whether or not rental units would be included in the program. So it's all in discussion now, but they are actively engaged with this. The Thursday was a briefing on the MPAC meeting that we've discussed ad nauseum, and I won't go into any more of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Then on Friday, I attended the Plaza de los Amigos grand opening, which was really cool. The chair spoke there, and I'm sorry, it was you that spoke there. You did a good job.
Often confused with guests.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Oh, but you did
mustache.
But you did such a good job. I'm sorry, I forgot.
I'm sure the chair did a great job and I was there too.
Thanks for your supporting role.
Oh, boy. Okay. I'm gonna be, I gotta keep going here. So, yeah,
I did talk to the TV channel.
there you go. Okay, but it is a very impressive site, and they've done such a wonderful job in reflecting the community there, it was great to see. Yesterday, I had the AOC Legislative Committee meeting. It was a pretty quick meeting in general. Chair, you may want to talk about that further. I also attended the Sheriff's Office recognition and swearing in ceremony. And then last night we had an ACRE meeting, which was a really, really well done ACRE meeting. Thank you to staff for making that work. Lisa Tattersall did a presentation on the library system and really did a good job. Our acre meetings, I was commenting last night that everybody around the table spoke. Everybody's engaged, everybody's asking questions. Some of the questions can be a little bit gotcha type of questions, but Lisa really fielded them well. And I learned from one of our members that for a community that she represents, the library is the most trusted place in Washington County, even above the food banks. What I'm quoting what she said. And it gave me pause to think about just the depth of impact that our library system has in our community. So I wanted to report that back to you as well. Tomorrow we do have the AOC District 8 meeting. Thank you in advance for your attendance there. We have 8 legislators that are going to be coming at noon and many staff people. We also have the chair, all 3 chairs will be there, and we have representatives from Clackamas County as well. We're hoping that additional folks will come from Multnomah County. Let's see. We've got the roundtable, the tour of the elections. I also have a PAB meeting on Thursday night that I'll be attending, and we are looking at the draft CAPER. That's the evaluation piece, and that we'll be sending back on our work, and I'll give you a report on what that looks like at the next meeting. And Saturday is the 50th celebration of community libraries at Cedar Mill and at Bethany. This will be the second time I attend because I went last Saturday and I had the wrong day. So I will be there on the right day.
How did Jerry do on his speech?
Yeah.
Well, I did just
How was that?
fabulous
How was
job
the chair?
on Saturday, but the chair didn't come.
Chair was on her bike ride.
Maida, you're gonna need to step in a little bit. A little better here.
I'm done.
Who would like to go next after all that?
Comedy routine, let's,
I know, you're setting the bar pretty high.
I'll continue, shoot. So as I've been doing for the last couple months, going around to my 6 cities and making presentations to their city council meetings. I did that last week to the city of Hillsborough, and what is specifically to the city of Hillsborough, I gave an update on the CAT program, and yeah, so that was good. So anyway, also had a fair board meeting, and I feel like I've already told you this, but if I have, I'm telling you again. So this last fair was, we set all kinds of new records. The attendance was up 19%, 186,811 people came through the gate, and that does not include vendors and all of that. So these are
Nice weather sure is a wonderful thing.
it is perfect weather for all 10 days. Carnival revenue up 22%, concession revenue up 27%, parking revenue up 30%. And what is probably even more fun is 62% increase in livestock entries. So
2 or 3? 32?
62.
Oh, 62.
Mhm. Yep. So yeah, we had 794 livestock entries this year. So kudos to Leah and her team out at the fairgrounds, putting on a great fair. So also attended the AOC Transportation Steering Committee meeting. Then I wrapped up the day, of course, going to the grand opening of the Plaza Los Amigos. You've already heard about that. Catherine did a great job there.
So did Jerry, by the way.
Saturday, this was Cornelius's week last week. Saturday, we went out to the celebrate the grand opening of the Drake Learning Center that has been named after Rob Drake, their long-term city manager, and that they have done a phenomenal job on that. That's attached, of course, to the library out there, and it's just going to be a great place for kids to go and learn. So kids and adults, actually. So let's see. Yes, I spoke at the sheriff's employee recognition swearing in ceremony yesterday.
I thought Catherine.
Yeah, I know. Pam was there too, but.
I was in another meeting.
But Pam was there, so, but I kept her under control a little bit better than usual. So last night was Acre, and as you pointed out, Acre is always engaging, 2 hours of Q&A for presentations. And with that, Lisa did do a great job. And so now those who are in the know now can have one of these little things. This is the WCCLS logo. And so, of
Didn't you
course,
get your sticker a couple weeks ago?
Courtney, no, I got it last night. Courtney and I have proudly showing that. Where's everybody else?
We got them a couple weeks ago.
I'm saying, where are they? Okay, let's show them off. Okay. Yeah, where's yours?
All sorts of library stickers.
Okay,
My laptop doesn't have room for all the stickers.
okay, so
that
anyway.
don't need to be great.
Danny did an okay job on presenting her. See, she knew that was
What
coming.
did she present on?
I don't know. It was good though. It was good.
It's about the Office of OEIC and
Yeah.
how we're embedding equity into all of our.
Oh,
The equity
great, the OEIC, yeah, the strategic action plan that
Yeah, all of
was
that.
presented at the board a couple Tuesdays
Yes.
ago. Good
Yeah.
job, Danny.
It's a very good job. Yes,
Yeah, she,
You.
and I'm sorry.
I said she did an okay job. That's. So tomorrow, gonna go to the AOC District 8 meeting. Gonna go to the LUT 40th anniversary, and I think that's Stephen Roberts' birthday, isn't it? His 40th birthday. Is that why?
We do not comment on age. No, no, no.
And let's see, Thursday morning, I will be at our morning roundtable. I will not be here in the afternoon as I will be going to Salem for the Council of Forest Trust Lands meeting, which we have invited representatives for all 15 trust counties, and we will be having conversations on the options, the timber options that I have been communicating to you guys about as well. And then Friday, I think we will continue with another small table timber meeting. So just it's a continuing saga. So there we go.
Commissioner Roger, I'm not following any of that. I'll wait. Go ahead, take it away.
He's a busy boy. Last Thursday and Friday, 2 transportation meetings, one at WEA, and we had Susan McLean and Senator Gorsuch. They're the 2 chairs of the Transportation Committee. Friday morning, I saw Susan again, this time with Chris Strickler in Tualatin for what they call their key, pardon me, a nice donor, by the way, key leaders breakfast. Just for your information, what I keep pushing personally, it's a 3-prong approach. Nobody's disagreeing. They're just trying to get things done, I think, a little faster than they're ready. Because my comments seem to resonate with a lot of business people, and that is one I think that they really should take a look internally to see that they've overturned every rock to see if there's any money on it. They should really have some kind of a public relations piece to the public that they have economized. I mean, this is no different than we do here at the county or anybody else. Have they said the right things in terms of saving money? 2, I said, you need to really, and nobody disagreed with me, by the way, by the speakers. 2, you need to prioritize, like our MISTIP program. Their system's too big. They're maintaining things they can't maintain. And prioritize their funding based upon levels of service. Susan says they're starting to do that. Chris says he'd like to do that. And then 3, I don't doubt that they need more revenue, but do it like every school district in the state does it. You find projects that everybody likes, or you find things that, are not funded on the top, and you slot your money accordingly. So if they thought like back in the 80s when we came up with the MISTEP program, we started grinding up roads. People didn't like that. So they said, what do you need? We said, we need more money. So what you do is you prioritize down. And so they're listening. They think that Washington County has done a good job. That's certainly not due to just LUT or myself or any of you. It's everybody collectively. Anyway, we're discussing all of that. I might squeeze in a meeting Thursday morning since we're starting a little earlier. It's government relations meeting at WA. I always like to hear what they're saying. And I think that it depends on whether our position is that we want growth or we don't want growth. If we don't want growth, we ought to ban this book in Washington County, because I don't know what you all think your life is worth. But I think a year in your life is worth a lot. For a male, if you live in Washington County, you're going to live 4 years longer than if you are in Multnomah County and 1 year in Clackamas County. So if you're a male, you probably want to move to Washington County because every year is worth a lot to your loved ones. So interesting statistics are in this book about a lot of good things about who we are and what we're doing. So
Who produced that?
what's the name of it? It's put out by the Oregon University Extension Service.
And the Ford.
Oregon by the
Foundation.
numbers.
And the fourth.
A lot of, we're at the bottom where we need to be at the bottom, meaning unemployment and other things, and at the top where we ought to be on other things. So this is a very glowing picture of Washington County, by the way.
They produce it
Anyway,
like
I'll
every
stop.
other year.
This is 24. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brand new. Till next year. Now you.
Yeah, I got that book yesterday too, and I was cruising through, and it also says you're gonna live 4 years longer if you're a woman in Washington County than if you're a male. So
Okay.
but it really is. Washington County does look great in those numbers. So I was really great. I was excited to see. Busy week ahead, as everyone said. I'm really looking forward to all the meetings all the conversations we'll embark on, and District 8 and our roundtable. But I'm really also excited for the tour of the elections. But I'm glad you initiated this, Commissioner Treese, because last time I requested, I was on the ballot and couldn't tour, so I'm really looking forward. This will be also my first time touring the elections. And yesterday, just quick report out for AOC. I'm one of the co-chairs for AOC's Health and Human Services Steering Committee. And yesterday we had our regular monthly meeting. It was one of the most well-attended meetings in my term as a co-chair. We had a great turnout. We met a new staff that is started to work for the Oregon Housing Community Services Department. And she shared their framework and what she's looking for is an input for OHCS's framework for county. So AOC said that they will forward to all county commissioners and chairs and judges. But I will, if they don't, I'll do it by the end of today so that Washington County has, and we can provide input as needed or forward to the appropriate staff. One of the exciting presentations that we got yesterday at the Health and Human Services Steering Committee was we received the report from Dan Hoover, who is a doctor with OHSU, and he talked about the statewide view of deflection. So your update, Tanya, was pretty timely and much appreciated. And he really highlighted Washington. He highlighted 4 counties in terms of their approach to deflection, as we all know, for Washington County. But one of the counties he highlighted was Washington County, and he had really good things to say. So
Who were the other 4, or who were the 4?
the other 4 were Clatsop County was one. The other one was Jackson County, who also has a different way of approach. Yeah. So, but Washington County, and he highlighted the counties that were really different from each other.
Marion County, one of them.
No, he did not highlight Marion County.
So who was the 4th?
I said 4? He highlighted 3. I misspoke. He highlighted 3 counties around that have a really ground. Jackson County was one of them, and then Clapson County, and then Washington County.
He contrasted the 3 programs. Is that what he did with those? Those are 3 really different counties.
Very different. But no, he really, just highlighted 3 counties that were, somewhat different approach to each other. As you know, we're very similar to Clackamas County. But one of the things I really liked is they're providing TAs, and I will include you, I will forward this. This is also another thing that AOC staff said they'll forward it, but Tanya, I would like to include you in that forward trend so that you could get it to the staff, because I'm not sure. I had a question about if we're utilizing the technical assistance that OHSU offers. OHSU got a grant and they're offering technical assistance, and there were 14 counties that participate in their current deflection TA. So, but it was very good. He had good things to say about our program and how, and what he's learning. I'll forward the presentation, but really, it's fascinating that there is a resource available, yet only 14 counties out of the 26 counties that got the grant are utilizing. So more to come, but from my end to follow up, I guess to-do list for me to follow up with Tanya and the staff to figure out if we're participating in the technical assistance.
We tend to have a pretty robust burn and a pretty robust behavioral health program, unlike many other counties. So I'm not surprised with our not needing it potentially.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
appreciate the follow-up information. We'll look into it. I know that we are taking, participating in webinars through the tech assistance.
Yeah, he did mention that Washington County we were one of the counties that participated at staff. And the feedback from that was really great too. So it shows they surveyed the members that attended that work session, the training. And I realize that my time is up, but I'll just close with this and say they assessed what the knowledge base was before they started the training, and then they assessed it after, and it increased. So it's very useful. It's the moral of the story of people who've attended those trainings. I'd like to attend next time. So
Thank you, Commissioner Fye. So on tomorrow is our first ever emergency preparedness fair for all employees of Washington County as well as Clean Water Services. So there is a schedule that's available. All you have to do is look at Horizons and figure that out. As such, I will be attending the noon to 2 o'clock portion of the AOC District 8 meeting, because I'll be helping staffing that. So nothing big through the AOC committees. I participate in the Public Safety Coordinating Committee, as you know, or Steering Committee, Public Safety, Justice, and Veterans. Also for Ledge, and there was no board. I want to make sure to direct your attention in the AOC District 8 packet that includes proposed budget and dues information for this year. The committees are recommending a flat 5% increase and working out the numbers. This doesn't include the CFTLC information. But in my view, it will take us, given where that takes us for 2025, it'll be approximately at that run rate 3 more years before we reach the cap, as Multnomah County has done. The roundtable agenda, I want to bring your attention to. We have changed the meeting time, which, as Commissioner Rogers had mentioned, is a little bit later. Starts at 10 a.m. To accommodate some needs, and will go through your day, likely through at least 4 p.m. With the tour of the elections office. And the executive session was moved to the morning to
to accommodate the needs that we have for Commissioner Willie to represent us at the CFTLC meeting.
Thanks for doing that too. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You bet, you bet. And so that's all I have for today.
And ditto that. Thank you for the coordinating council meeting. In the morning.
Oh, yeah. So that's it from me. So, as far as I know, that's it for today. We have a full set of information for our roundtable meeting on Thursday. So please come all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and we'll go from there. Anything else? All right. And with that, we are hereby adjourned. Thank you.
Bring that metro issue.